the US. The deficit in 2010 was 11.5% of GDP. Total government and private sector debt is almost 5 times GDP. If you take into account unfunded liabilities, for instance, in our case, pensions, as you know, is an unfunded liability, it will be 6.5 times the GDP. Debt is $15 trillion, $250,000 per adult per child in the UK. The US, similar. I won't go into it. I was thinking of doing that, but I'll avoid it for the moment. So what is the paradigm shift? Okay. That was the data. What does it mean? Okay. What is the lessons that we've learned? And then the relationship with Pakistan. Governments have lost their credibility. Something that had never happened before. Have lost their credibility that they will be able to honor their obligations. The new world is, it is characterized by crumbling creditworthiness of major industrial nations, and I repeat, their problems are not temporary. Second paradigm shift. Crises in different parts of the world reinforce each other. One feeds the other. The reason, as we all know, this is a highly interconnected world today, and no one, I repeat, no one is immune. The third paradigm shift. All welfare states, I keep reading, Pakistan will be made a welfare state. All welfare states, with the honorable exception of Norway and Sweden, and please remember they have very high tax rates, are all bankrupt. Welfare states are all bankrupt. Why? Generous health and social benefits, low working hours, long vacations. Sounds familiar, right? Early retirement, relatively equal income distributions. All these things, frankly, are no longer sustainable. The fifth shift. To avoid financial crises, financial regulation will have to become much more robust than it has been in the past, and everyone will have to monitor debt very carefully. The reference to Pakistan I'll make clear in a moment. The sixth, despite what people say, there is no doubt that modern day capitalism had a great long run for 2 centuries since the Industrial Revolution, and managed to actually lift billions out of poverty. Unfortunately, communism doesn't have a record anywhere near that. And before you talk of China, frankly, the reality is that the political, economic, and financial structures are still evolving. So we don't know. And everyone can't be China. Please remember, and that's the 7th point I want to make. Only 6 countries in the world have managed in our lifetimes to get out of poverty. Incidentally, all in South and East Asia. There's something about that area that we need to understand. It's work ethics, it's a number of things. It's interesting. This whole, to try and understand what makes governments or countries tick is not that simple. But it is something worth looking at. Why it's only happened towards the East and not elsewhere. This 8th point. Very high levels of inequity, as a result of innovation and entrepreneurship, which has bought those who've managed to make fortunes very powerful and has bought them influence. And we all know examples. There are enough examples that we are aware of. which has also created a revulsion against these levels of inequity. How do you handle this inequity and make a much fairer society? It brings me to the last point on this. So there are question marks about the ability of political systems to respond to these shifts. It is also instructive. I heard Shabbar and someone else talk about it here earlier. If you look at the West, and two things stand out. One is their ability to innovate, the technology part, the point that was made by Professor Adil Najam, and the resolution and the resolve of the people to be able to get out of the mess. And it is fascinating that in countries like Italy, in countries like Greece, and in societies which are highly educated and mature democracies, it is fascinating that they brought prime ministers who were technocrats. So you start asking, in this day and age, to run complex economies, complex systems, is it that simple to be run by general politicians? It's not, I'm not advocating anything, but it is a very interesting example of what is happening in societies which are much more mature, highly educated, and even there was a realization that it cannot be handled by people other than technocrats and professionals. So let me come finally to what does it mean for us. The first and foremost, no one in the world out there today has a kind of deep pockets. I know we keep saying that the whole world can't ignore us. We are too important. The reality is, no one has that kind of money to help a country of 180 million people. And the reason I am emphasizing that is, if they are going through an austerity program, they would like to know how we are trying to fend for ourselves. What is it that we are doing for ourselves? I kept hearing, someone mentioned that in Abdullah Yusuf's time, revenues increased dramatically, no doubt. But just to emphasize 2 points, just so that you can understand the nature of the problem. I'll make 3 points actually. First,